Hello everyone, hopefully you're good. Welcome to the stream. Sorry for starting late, but here we are. And let's see if I can fix one aspect quickly. Here we go. There we go. So welcome everyone to the stream. Please type to the chat where you're calling in and how you're doing today. It is Cyber Monday. It's one of those days when everyone goes online after the Black Week, Black Friday, and gets their digital goodies. We often have done one of those webinars where we talk about some of the products and offerings, but this time we decided to share something important and interesting to everyone. And today's topic is going to be about the dark side of personal development and entrepreneurship. I did write a pretty popular post on LinkedIn and Facebook on the dark side of entrepreneurship, and it went viral. About 300,000 people saw it, and I got a lot of messages in my inbox about it. And we did Biohacker Summit in Amsterdam last month, and I did talk about the dark side of personal development there. It was a very popular talk. So I decided to do a little webinar this time talking about the dark side of everything, because I think we are often on the way of our own progress and development. You know, the enemy in the end is not in the world, it's right in the mirror, it's you. So that's the aspect I want to really dive deep into, the psychology of why we do anything, like why do we do what we do, or why do we wake up in the morning to trying to be better versions of ourselves or build startups and companies and trying to surpass even our own achievements. Like why is it that the kind of only the sky is the limit, so to say, and there's a certain like personality type, which is kind of this overachiever or any kind of perfectionist who is really, you know, trying to control everything outside and inside of them, really. And I see that there's a psychological reason why we do that. Why do we go for perfectionism? Why do we need to be better, even surpassing our own achievements? So before we go into all of that excitement, let me just remind you that a little bit about my background, if you don't know who I am. And so let's see, I'm gonna play around a little bit here. So I'm Teemu Arina, and I wrote together with my colleagues the Biohacker's Handbook. It's a popular book on optimizing health and well-being with biological and technological tools. In this book, we go into optimizing exercise, nutrition, sleep, mind, and work, and how these can be seen as systems that can be optimized with the help of nutrition and behavioral modification, exercise, meditation, like different modalities to hack the body and the mind. It's a very popular book. You can get it from biohackercenter.com. And so my background as an entrepreneur has been that I've been looking at the intersection of man and machine for over half of my life. So I started as an entrepreneur when I was 16. I'm 40 now. I was very popular in the field of education and learning. In my 20s, I was part of different projects for advancing the future of learning and the field of education by bringing in social technology, social media into the field. I was part of big European projects of these different research and development projects in that area. I became very well known in the field of work and leadership and how new technologies can be used in that. And the last decade has been about biohacking. That cover image there is released 10 years ago. It's kind of the Time magazine of Finland, Nyt. And mittamies that reads there is the metrics man, the man with metrics. So it was all about the quantified self, and it told the story of my personal healing journey. So I've been looking at different ways to optimize human behavior with technology for a decade now, because that was my way out of toxic behavioral patterns that I actually evolved during my time, a decade in the field of entrepreneurship. So I want to talk about that. Oh, by the way, actually I need some power and electricity, so I'm gonna just pick up my my charger there. Just a minute, so before the whole stream cuts off. So just a minute. But please type into the chat where you're coming from, what field you're from, what are you doing. I'm happy to take any questions and comments during the stream. And I'm going to give a little presentation on optimizing human performance and well-being by really deeply understanding and evaluating why do you do what you do. So let's connect the electricity. Here we go. And we're back. So let's see if we have anything interesting in the chat. There's a couple of people from Estonia and from the Netherlands and from Finland. Welcome to the chat. Welcome. So let's jump into this whole thing. So I did publish a little post recently on entrepreneurship, the dark side of entrepreneurship. And in this post, I basically went through a couple of different points. And this went viral. It reached 300,000 people and thousands of likes and reactions and shares and comments and feedback from people, how important the topic is. And if I summarize it for you just briefly. So there's a conference called Slush. Slush is one of the leading or world's top conferences for startup entrepreneurs. People interested in building high growth companies. And it's pretty much the Silicon Valley model of entrepreneurship, which is full of this grandiosity that you're going to build the world's best whatever, and then they are seeking for funding. And the problem needs to be at least $1 billion or more. And it's full of big numbers, full of focused ideas on how we're going to tackle this problem and solve the biggest problems in humanity. Some of the role models include, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos, who have built big companies, and young people want to be like them. Now, what I basically said by being part of Slush since 2008, I was in the first event that was organized. I've been on both sides. I've been pitching on stage my startups and my ideas. I've been raising venture capital, millions of dollars into my own and my friends' startups. I have been on the side of the investor, advising startups, giving the feedback, investing my own money in startups. I've been on the side of organizers. I've been building the technology platform for Slush originally for matchmaking between startups and investors to help them find the right match and basically find funding or good ideas and scale them up. So I would say I know something about this. And in the process, I've come to see a certain pattern. So when you look at startups, most of them basically fake and lie about their status of their company, their product, about their team, about their achievements, about themselves. And there's all these coaches who are helping them to pitch or develop their brand or personal brand to be better at what they are doing, which is faking their outcomes. And it's basically this fake it till you make it culture where we all expect people to give like a sugar-coated version of where they're going. Everyone kind of subconsciously knows that, or asks the question like, what is real here? Is the product real? Is the team real? Is the company real? And the people giving those talks, like they are not really honest, or they don't need to be. Actually, it's rewarded not to be, because if you want to really succeed, you want to think big and you want to show, where you're going, and you must have a big, big vision, and you have to be determined and confident that you can achieve it. And so weakness is not celebrated or accepted. Actually, in this culture, weakness or failure is considered as experience that they even turn into a positive thing. If your company goes bankrupt, it's called experience, and you just start again. That's the kind of Silicon Valley model. If you've gone through different companies, multiple different companies, that's called experience. It's not about loyalty or engagement, really. It's about building big things, selling them, starting again. And this kind of behavior is described as serial entrepreneurship, and it is somehow glorified that serial entrepreneurs are the ones who are building the future. Now, what we also have is on the other side, we have investors. And investors, they often don't have money. They act like they have money. Most of them are investing someone else's money. They have fund agreements, limited partners and boards, and agreements with, let's say, insurance companies or pension funds or wherever the money is coming from, what they can invest in and what not. Often their hands are tied. Also, the question is like what stage your fund is in. Sometimes the fund has already expired, or it has already invested most of its early stage money. So what these investors do, often they just act like they have money. They would pitch you about their fund and who they invested in and all of that. And when you give your presentation to them, they would say, that's very interesting, keep us updated. Or that's very interesting, but you are too early, but keep us updated. Or they might say something like, you are not yet at product market fit, or some other fake excuse why they're not going to invest. And their plan is not necessarily even, they're not really interested, not really investing. So your job is to figure out all that on both sides, like who's faking what, and you don't want to waste your time on the wrong people. So you don't want to waste your time with teams that are not going to build a real product and don't have the real team. And you don't want to waste your time with investors who don't have any money. So there's all these different methods and techniques how to figure it out. Like, for example, you never talk to analysts or associates. You talk only to general partners in funds. In terms of startups, you don't really focus that much on, the product and idea, but you look at the team, who's done it, have they done it before? So you're not wasting your time on the wrong entrepreneurs who are not going to make it. There's all these different ways of like figuring it out. Now, startup conferences, they run swimsuit competitions. So it's like a competition who's the most beautiful, smartest, and has the biggest potential. And this is what startups do. They kind of sugarcoat their pitch decks and presentations, and they give like a 5-minute talk on stage. And Slash 100 is based on like 1,000 of these kind of startups who get filtered down by experts into 100. And then they pitch, and after different rounds, you have maybe 20 startups left, and then you have the top 3 or 5, and then you have a winner. Unfortunately, often the one who fakes it will make it. And this year, the winner of this competition was Immigram. Immigram is a startup that helps technically capable people often or startup people to migrate to the West, anywhere really, to migrate. And that is a big thing, of course, in the whole tech industry, that it's very hard to find talent, and migrating is a big problem. It's a big problem. It's a huge problem. But this company said they are a UK-based company, although 6 of the founders are from Russia, from Moscow. Links to Gazprom and other Russian companies, and if I remember correctly, also some Russian investors in it. They would say that they're helping, let's say, Ukraine by helping developers to migrate to the West. But of course, men can't leave the country easily. It's mainly females. But if you really look at the whole customer base of this company, 65% of the company's customers are Russians who are trying to migrate to the West, which is great. I mean, more talent here and for us, and there's huge brain drain happening. But the challenge, of course, then is if you have sanctions in place to limit the privileged ones to migrate and do business, now there's these startup companies helping them to avoid sanctions. And this is very evident of the greed in the whole industry, that there are players who are ready to fund just about any idea if the opportunity is huge. Probably, this startup is really profiting on the conflict we have right now. And it could be that the founders are really genuinely willing to support Ukraine, and maybe they fled their own government to just to have even the freedom to do things that they love to do. But in the end, morally, it's not okay to go and say that you're a UK-based company if you're from Russia, and it's not okay to say that you stand with Ukraine if most of your money comes from Russians. So that's the fake it till you make it thing. So people are not telling the truth, and when called out, they would say some bullshit, for example, that we actually support Ukraine and we stand with Ukraine and all that. Now, once this came out, it became a huge scandal, and they got their the winner got revoked. So if we think about it, there's a lot of examples like this right now in news. So for example, Elizabeth Holmes ran a company called Theranos that said that they would be able to make from small amounts of blood basically analysis and accurate blood biomarkers from just a drop of blood instead of having several vials. It was revolutionary. And this woman raised a lot of money from venture capitalists. The product or the technology didn't really work. She just lied. It was pretty much a fake it till you make it thing, that maybe one day we will figure it out, but they just raised more money for it. And you kind of end up in a loop where you can't get out once you lie. You have to keep on lying. And what is interesting about Elizabeth Holmes is that the way she behaves and the way she dresses is not the way she dressed or behaved before she founded this company. So for example, one thing that she did deliberately was to change her voice just to be lower. So she would speak like this to sound more convincing. And as a woman, she started using a lower tonality of voice just to come across more trustworthy and speak more slowly and have pauses and all that. Another thing was because she idolized Steve Jobs, and she faked that to the point where people even called her the next Steve Jobs. She would track down exactly the same clothing that Steve Jobs used, the same brand, and get the same kind of black clothes and outfits. And she would say that, yeah, I'm a busy entrepreneur, so I don't have time to, let's say, select my outfit, so I have my closet is full of the same shirt. Exactly the same thing as Steve Jobs would do, or what probably Mark Zuckerberg would say about his jeans and his typical outfit. many startup entrepreneurs have the same thing, like they have like, hoodies and all that. So it's part of the way you dress is part of your identity, and you kind of build it up based on your idols. So it's cool in the startup industry to have a hoodie, for example. So you need to have a hoodie if you are about to come across as a trustworthy startup entrepreneur almost. Just like in the old times, you had to have a tie and a suit if you work for IBM. So dressing is part of our identity in that sense. Now, there's another amazing entrepreneur. His name is Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX. And he basically raised billions of dollars, and he would claim he's a billionaire, and he would act as a billionaire, act like he was a billionaire. He would invest in philanthropic things, and he had this effective altruism philosophy of donating as much of his wealth and money. And he would donate to research in preventing the next pandemic, and he would invest in the ecosystem, and he would donate money into presidential campaigns. All good. The problem was that was not his money. He was giving away money or deposits of his own customers from FTX, and then they would also gamble on the money with Alameda Research. And of course, that led to the most ridiculous collapse in the financial history, comparable to Enron. Now, what is interesting about Sam Bankman-Fried is this chat conversation that came out recently, where he's explaining to a journalist what happened, and he basically claims here that I just shared bullshit, and it was not really true, really. And there he's saying everyone goes around pretending that perception reflects reality. It doesn't. Some of this decade's greatest heroes will never be known, and some of its most beloved people are basically shams. So he's telling exactly what I tell here: fake it till you make it. Another thing that he's saying, that you were really good by talking ethics for someone who kind of saw it all as a game with winners and losers. Yeah, I had to be. It's what reputations are made of to some extent. I feel bad for those who get fucked by it. By this dumb game we woke Westerners play, where we say all the right shibboleths and so everyone likes us. So he kind of comes across as a sociopath, but he's really reflecting the undercurrent of our culture, of the way how we build companies, that everyone is just talking bullshit and no one's really telling the truth. And he continues, I fucked up big multiple times. You know what was maybe the biggest single fuck up? Oh, the one thing everyone told me to do, which is basically filing for bankruptcy, chapter 11. And he continues, if I hadn't done that, withdrawals would be opening up in a month with customers fully whole. But instead I filed, and the people in charge are trying to burn it all to the ground out of shame. I might still get there, but after way more collateral damage. So basically what he's trying to say here is that if he had not filed for bankruptcy but kept on faking till he makes it, basically raising more capital, he could have saved the company. He could have saved the deposits. So he says that his biggest mistake was not to fake it till he makes it. So he's basically saying that he should have continued doing what he did up until now, to raise more capital, to sell a bubble, and that would have saved everyone. And that's just crazy, isn't it? What next? What's your plan? I have 2 weeks to raise 8 billion. That's basically all that matters for the rest of my life. Well, a month ago, I was one of the world's greatest fundraisers. Now I'm the fallen wreckage of one. But there's the thing about being fallen. There are people who know what that's like and who want to do for someone else what nobody did for them. There we go. We live in a pretty toxic, and I have to say fucked up culture in terms of entrepreneurship and building our dreams. So I want to jump deep into this and talk about it. What is the problem here? what is the psychological thing in the dark side, and also in the fields of personal development, biohacking, nutrition, dieting, all of that. There are people who are doing a lot of these things and being the role models of these things because they are wounded healers and they are just faking it. That's what I'm going to jump into next. But before I go there, let's see if we have any cool comments here. So, yeah. Oh, there's some people from Russia, from Italy, from Paris, Florida, Mexico. Theranos, quite a mess. Yeah, exactly, it was. Keep on the comments coming. So what I'm saying here is that this is a universal problem globally. It's part of our culture. This is part of the whole industrial machinery in a sense. There was a great documentary released a few years ago called The Corporation. In that, the documentaries, they took the diagnostic criteria of psychopathy and they evaluated companies on average, Fortune 500 companies, like do they match the qualities if the company is like a person, if that person went through, because actually we do handle companies like legal persons. If we did a diagnostic on these legal persons, what turns out they check all the boxes for psychopathy. Basically unconcern for the feelings of others, incapability to maintain enduring relationships, reckless disregard for the safety of others. Think about the environmental damage we are doing with companies who claim that they are saving the environment. Deceitfulness, repeated lying and conning of others for profit happens all the time. Incapacity to experience guilt. Yeah, I mean, it's called experience, I guess, when you blow up someone's account. Failure to conform to social norms with respect to lawful behaviors. In Nazi Germany, the guards at concentration camps, why did they do what they do? They believed, they were just following orders. When you asked them, they would just say they were just following orders. They would do outrageous, unimaginable things. And it's happening right now all around the world, not just in Ukraine, but there's things happening where people do things because they don't feel they're responsible. They feel they're part of an organization. They can't help it. They can't really do anything about it. So they just play the game along. And if you're a guard in a concentration camp, you're just going to do what you do. And you kind of split, you isolate, your responsibility from the situation because it's your ordinates, the high-ups who are responsible. It's in our society, we would blame, the leaders of our countries instead of ourselves, of our shortcomings. Now, interestingly, in companies, people would do things because they believe it is good for the company. That is in the company's interest that we keep on lying to customers. So even if individually you might have some morals, collectively you exhibit psychopathic behavior traits or narcissistic behavior traits. And I remember when I was a consultant, I would consult one of these like sugary beverage companies who sell basically bottled sugar, soft drinks. And the people in the marketing department were young, attractive women who were really fit and health conscious. Their diet, everything was a check. They would not consume their own product that they were marketing. So to me, that kind of came across as like hypocritical or hypocrisy, that, or even paradoxical, that you would do you would do that for a job. You would sell things, and there's a case of a marketing company that was doing marketing for these tobacco companies, and the CEO would feel guilt about it, but there's so much profits and money to be made that it was really, really hard to get out until they had to get out and they had the opportunity, they got out, and the CEO said, even though it damaged their bottom line, it was the best decision ever to not do that ever again. But in the end, most will still continue doing these toxic behaviors. And well, we are all damaged to a certain extent. If you look at startup entrepreneurs, I saw statistics that over 70% have mental illness. If not to begin with, they will get one in the job after 2 years. 80% of startup entrepreneurs experience burnout symptoms after a couple of years doing the job. They are twice as likely to have depression, 4 times as likely to have substance abuse problems like alcohol, tobacco, medications, drugs. They are 10 times more likely to have PTSD, bipolar symptoms, ADHD, like all these kind of erratic behaviors. And these are the people that are selected. They would have features of the dark triad. The dark triad of personality traits. Dark triad of narcissism, characterized by grandiosity, pride, egotism, and lack of empathy. Machiavellism, characterized by manipulation and exploitation of others and lack of morality, callousness, and extreme self-centeredness. And psychopathy, characterized by antisocial behavior, sociopathy, impulsivity, selfishness, callous and unemotional traits, remorselessness. Think of Holmes from Terrence, for example, would never feel she did anything wrong. Now, interestingly, there is comorbidities associated with these behaviors. Narcissism related to alcohol and drug dependence, and Machiavellism with high cocaine use, addictive internet use, probably use in dopaminergic drugs. It's very well known that Sam Bankman-Fried used dopaminergic drugs and promoted his employees to use some, so-called nootropics. And then psychopathy, positive modulation of brain activation to drug cues. So basically, it's very interesting that people who have psychopathic traits, if they go to therapy, instead of getting healed, they gain more psychological tools to manipulate others. So they really don't see problems in their own behavior. So now we look at where these behaviors come from, and we look into childhood experiences, adverse childhood experiences. These are often the root cause of what is going on. And let me kind of paint a picture here. So when a young child is growing up, the child is deeply dependent of its mother. So if we think in terms of object relations, the relationship to your mother, your father, your caretakers, basically. At birth, up until 6 months old, the child is in a symbiotic relationship with the mother. Basically, the mother and the child is the same. The child doesn't recognize the boundary where mother starts and where he starts or he ends. When mother goes to the other room, mother doesn't exist, and the child cries, feeling that he died or she died because mother doesn't exist anymore, he doesn't exist. Now, it takes some time to grow up to realize that when mother goes to the other room, that you can differentiate from the objects, that you understand that mother still exists, although you are, or the mother is in another room. So mother still exists. So this ability to visualize and understand that separation is key. Now, when the child grows up from 36 months and up, it starts to integrate and understand different objects and representations and understand those as separate individuals. And as you grow up into puberty or early teens, most children are narcissists, basically. They are basically narcissistic. They act out Up until that point, the caretakers were the best thing ever. Like everything that mother or dad does is the coolest thing ever. Suddenly, when you get to puberty, everything that your mother or father does is like not cool, and you start to test the boundaries. You don't come home at the same, at the right time. You try to piss them off. Like there's all these different behaviors. You start to hang out with your friends. You want to be more like your friends than your parents, and this individuation separation process is extremely important. The separation from primary objects, which is basically your caretakers, is an important process of establishing the self, where you start to see something else. And often we seek from the outside role models. In teens, it might be some singer in a band or some social media influencer or whatever. So you start to idealize those external objects, and you start to internalize them by dressing like them or behaving like them. So we have these mirror cells through which we copy other people's behaviors. And when we idolize or idealize someone outside, we kind of start to like slowly becoming like them. So you're kind of the average of the people you surround yourself with, like 5-6 people. That's basically the idea that you start to copy their behaviors, their way of talking, their micro expressions, their body language, their even like young people, they copy their friends' dreams. Like your friend wants to go to a specific school, so you also want to go. You don't have really your own thinking there. Or maybe it was your parents who idolized or idealized you, that you're going to be a doctor, so you're now going to medical school. You never ask yourself, do I really want this? And as you grow up, you kind of build your identity. And this narrative identity is an internalized and evolving story of the self. You construct it yourself. You basically look at your life experiences. Maybe you explain it based on the family you were born into. Or maybe you talk about the education you had or the experience in working life, or maybe you talk about your challenges in life or whatever, what made you. What made me? I would tell you, like, I became an entrepreneur when I was 16. I was teaching in high school when I was 17. I was preparing students for university course when I was 18. At 19, I decided not to go to university. I studied things on my own. And because of that, I have unique things to offer, because I'm not like schooled or programmed into specific school of thought. I became a public professional speaker in my 20s. I went around the world. I built companies. I was advising things. When I was 30, I got the ulcer. That led me to health and wellness, understanding that this body is important. That it's not only about the external things, but I need to take care of the internal world as well. So last decade, I've been into optimizing the body and the mind. And the next decade now is about the spirit, like, leaving some impact based on my life experience and wisdom. Now, this is my narrative identity. Everyone has one. You select specific things, not everything. You kind of have a version of it. Your friends might tell a different story of you than you do. But this is kind of the narrative. This is kind of the mask, the persona that you kind of construct. And there's nothing wrong about it until you start to take yourself too seriously and you believe everything you tell yourself. So on masks and personas, a narcissistic person avoids actually becoming his true self. He aims to become his false self. Now, persona, which is Latin, literally means the mask. It's not the real you, it's the mask that is in there. So what is a narcissist? Is someone who actually doesn't really have a grandiose ego, has actually a weak ego, undeveloped ego from childhood, where the mother, often cold, didn't allow the kid to separate from the caretaker, just hold him back, or maybe always kept him in the shadow of his brother, or idealized the child, like the child is going to be the best thing ever and all that, and the child felt like always not able to fulfill the dreams of his caretakers, always feeling less and lack. And this sense of lack then fuels that narcissistic behavior, creating this fake version of you, the facade, and basically projecting it outwards. And today we have the social technology, social media world that enables us to build that personal brand. If you look at someone's LinkedIn profile, or you look at someone's social media profile or Instagram profile, everyone knows it's all fake. Deliberate camera angles, deliberately selected photos. It's a narrative that you construct, and you have like certain things that you tell that you are about. I'm Teemu Arina, I'm a professional biohacker. So it becomes your identity, what you tell to the world. And there's this very interesting effect called the looking glass effect, where your social media following starts to mirror the aspects of that it thinks you are, and often in a caricature way. So for example, if you say that you're a biohacker and you're into carnivore diet, your audience starts to expect that you always do carnivore. So you have this pressure to be this person who's doing the carnivore diet all the time. And your audience expects that, hey, that's the carnivore person. Now, interestingly, the others like build a caricature out of you. They amplify those aspects in you, and you're utterly aware, consciously or unconsciously, what your following is expecting you to be. In terms of technology, there is another interesting effect. It's called the Proteus effect. The tendency for people to become their digital avatars. And if you think of like people who play online games or something like this, they kind of start to express characteristics of their avatars. What is avatar? Avatar is Sanskrit, and it means descendant from God. And this descendant from God, so basically, just like in the Bible, God created man in his own image. You create yourself in your image. So you create this kind of fake version of you online, and then that becomes, your part of your identity. Isn't it interesting? Now, one thing that fuels people and their behavior is their coping mechanisms. Coping mechanisms are the strategies people often use in the face of stress and trauma to help manage painful or difficult emotions. So if you think of drug use or binge eating or watching Netflix or reading articles late into the night or watching this freaking YouTube channel, you're soothing yourself. You're distracting yourself from something that you actually need to do. And many people distract themselves in different ways. It's very well known that if you take heroin, for example, that releases dopamine, if you have lab animals in a cage and there's a button that gives them heroin, they will keep on hitting that button until they die. Now, interestingly, if you introduce social interactions and environment, the rodents are less likely to press the button because they have all these like social interactions and relationships that makes them more likely to get the dopamine from somewhere else. So suddenly pressing the button is not only one thing. So this whole physical addiction thing in terms of heroin or cocaine, if you have a peer support group, if you have friends, like all of that, is less likely to get addicted than things. So we're social animals, and there's all these different ways how we get rewarded. But social technology and social media is such a big vehicle and reputation and what other people think about you that we fight for the ends to be recognized and accepted. And yeah, now many of these like coping mechanisms, how we deal with difficult emotions, they develop in childhood, and they build our ways to relate to others. So what is your like relationship style or type? if you have a positive model of the self and you're positive towards others, you're more likely to be a secure type. You trust people. You trust yourself. You have clear boundaries. You're okay not to please everyone. Now, if you have a negative model of the self, but you have positive model of others, you're more anxious. You try to like please everyone. If you have low, if you have a negative models of others and you have a positive model of the self, you try to avoid people. You think that other people will just corrupt you, like better to stay away from other people. You're okay to be on your own. Now, if you have negative model of others and you have negative model of self, you're fearful, you're afraid of interacting with others and relationships, you run away at the first opportunity. Now, these models, they develop in childhood and they come across like the way how you deal with authority, like your father or mother or whatever, like, like how your father is treating you, or like, let's say if you were in a childhood home which was violent and there was like the presence of violence was always there, like, you know, you're going to get hit any moment. And your coping mechanism to deal with that was to always have, you know, your shoulders a little bit like tense and like expecting anything, and maybe even like having your hands almost in front of your head. Like you're more likely to turn into this like person with poor posture and like back problems and always like having tension on your shoulders. And when you become aware of these aspects, you can potentially release yourself from the burden and the suffering. Unfortunately, many people, they go through life without ever seeing where their behaviors come from. So if you look at entrepreneurs and the fact that they push themselves to achieve greater and greater things, often it's insecurity that fuels them. They have fear of failure. They feel they need to accomplish more than others. They feel that they need to top their personal achievements. This is what German psychoanalyst Karen Horney talked about. And there's different neurotic strategies that you deploy to make sure that that's the case. So either you desire to be liked, you seek approval, compliance, and you're clingy. If you submit to other people, often there's anger inside of you that you are building up. So it's fake. Or you might have an aggressive stance where you feel hostility everywhere, you exploit others, you seek power and control. Inside, that person is insecure and weak, so that's also fake. And then there's the detachment strategy, feeling of isolation, need for independence, need to be perfect in everything, coldness sometimes towards others. And these are all toxic coping mechanisms or neurotic strategies, how we kind of deal with the uncertain world and difficult emotions. Now we go into cluster B personality disorders from the Diagnostic Manual of Mental Illness, DSM-5. In cluster B, you have dramatic personality types. You have overly emotional or unpredictable personality types, including borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, histrionic, which is like comes from the word hysteria. So you're hysteric, you're often attention seeking, or maybe you're the opposite. Maybe you're antisocial, you just avoid people. And what is interesting is like these things are considered separate, like clusterizations, but often there is like a common theme behind it. It has been also said that all of these are narcissistic to a certain extent, and they all have aspects of temporal psychosis to deal with difficult emotions. Now, if we think of a narcissistic behavior or narcissists, they seek supply. They basically seek external validation for themselves. Maybe they are somatic narcissists where, you know, they are in love with their own bodies and they need others to give them approval of their looks and body type and behavior. Think of all these exercise nutrition diet experts out there. Or maybe they are cerebral narcissists where they're in love with their own thoughts. Think of all the teachers and judges and politicians and all of that who could like talk endlessly and they love their own thinking and their own voice. Or think of like the narcissists who are grandiose, who are materialistic, where they show, all their wealth and achievements and all of that. They just live from validation, from the fact that they have the best car, the best watch or whatever. Or think of the vulnerable narcissist or covert narcissists who they come across as vulnerable, but it's one way to seek other people's energy and attention. They're basically energy vampires. So they complain about things all the time. Oh, I'm so poor. I have so many difficulties. Oh, life is so difficult, and they seek other people's energy and attention and care by complaining constantly. That's also a narcissistic type. A typical cycle for narcissists is the idealize, devalue, and discard. So first, when you meet one, they idealize you. And the reason is that they kind of take a snapshot of you, just like a digital camera. Ding! They kind of see a mother, they see a father. Think of a romantic partner, like they idealize everything about you. Suddenly everything you eat is the best thing ever. All your hobbies are the best ever. Everything you are and do is the best thing ever. Until they start to get information from you or the environment or data into their nervous system that you might be not their idealized version. So that's when they start to devalue you. Like they start to like complain about what you eat, what you do, like your hobbies, like your behaviors, all of that. And it's actually a deep fear that you're not like the ideal perfect mother. But there is this whole process that they're actually reliving the individuation separation process because it went wrong in their childhood. So first they idealize you. They act like you're their mother or father. But then after a while, they need to violently separate from you, just like a teen from its parents. And they start to like test your boundaries and they start to devalue and say bad things about you. And in the end, they discard you. You don't exist anymore. Maybe they then, find another person to love bomb and make sure that you know about it. And this happens not just in like loving relationships, it also happens in business life. You find business partners, you idealize them. You see only the good things in them, how they're a great part of the team. And then you get in bed with them, they become shareholders in your company. And after a while, you start to devalue them. They're no longer delivering what you believe they should be delivering. And in the end, you end up with fight. And interestingly, narcissists, they find each other. It's like, because they see other people, they kind of feel when they are in the company of people like them, finally they feel that they're seen. So think of all these entrepreneurs who go to startup conferences, who find each other, who feel like suddenly, or people in the personal development or whatever thing, they find the others. Suddenly you see yourself in the mirror. And what is interesting about this kind of personality type is that it's like artificial intelligence. It's a house of mirrors. These are AI-generated pictures of a person who is into personal development. You see like a dark coat that came out thanks to Oliver Barnett, who generated these with Midjourney. But just like artificial intelligence, narcissists are like house of mirrors. There's no one there behind the mask. It's all a replication of success of others. So narcissist is like copying and very good at it, imitating others, to become Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or whatever is success for you. And they are like AI, copying all these things, like how I need to dress, how I need to look, what do I need to say, how I need to behave, like all of these behaviors, sucking it all in and integrating it into almost like an AI model that generates their not true self, but the fake self. Remember I said that a narcissist is someone who is not trying to become their true self. They try to become their false self. Now, all of us have a shadow. And Carl Jung said that I must also have a dark side if I am to be whole. So of course you have this subconscious anima mundi, the inner world, that is your true self. They're somehow like the aspect of you that you try to hide from. And then you have the ego, the persona you build on top of it. And there's some good tools that we can use to figure out like aspects of your shadow. Not this one, this one. So the dark factor model, I did this test myself at darkfactor.org, where you kind of score yourself in the spectrums of egoism, greed, Machiavellism, moral disengagement, narcissism, psychological entitlement, psychopathy, sadism, self-centeredness, spitefulness. And on this test, I came across as a lower part of the spectrum. So in the middle is like most of the people in the population. And to score high on these things, like it just like goes down. So most people would score somewhere here. So no one's going to be zero in everything. Everyone's going to have like some kind of mechanisms of self-interest or spitefulness or psychological entitlement and egoism. And maybe there is an aspect of healthy egoism. Maybe there is a healthy aspect of splitting and avoidance and psychopathic behaviors. Maybe there's a healthy need and way of standing up for your needs, and maybe even being a bit self-centered and sadistic in some situations, run away with the expense of others. And these are all human emotions. We all have them. But the question really is like, do you recognize these aspects in yourself, and are you like truthful about it? Do you want to change something? So I recommend you all to go to darkfactor.org and making these tests. There is 2 dialogues that are important for healing. It's to recognize the inner dialogue for the need to become somebody. Like when you grow up, like there's all this pressure from the environment to be someone, be a doctor, be a, successful in life, become a family man someday. And then there's the inner dialogue of the lack of self-worth, that you feel like you're not really achieving the things that you should in your life. Like you're not getting the degrees you should, you're not getting the job you deserve, you're not really succeeding in your business. Interestingly, many of these voices in your mind are not yours. It's often related to operant conditioning, relative positioning, like the way you position yourself in relationship to others. It's all the conditioning that comes from these like social cues. You internalize these expectations. So the expectations of your family or friends or society, you internalize those as expectations towards yourself. So it's important to recognize where your thoughts come from, really. Like, are those yours or someone else's thoughts? Now, interestingly, what I'm intrigued about is the fact that 74% of therapists have experienced some kind of wounding experience in their lives that led to a career choice. So if you work with a therapist or a psychotherapist, most likely they're solving their own problem. Doctors are twice as likely to abuse the drugs that they prescribe. They're also like twice as likely to get the disease that they help to treat, which is crazy. But they're often solving their own problem. They are wounded healers. Just like immortal Chiron, the master of healing arts, was poisoned by Hercules' poisonous arrows, and that made him mortal again. And when he was mortal, he decided to spend the rest of his life to heal others. Carl Jung said that a good half of every treatment that probes at all deeply consists of the doctor examining himself, his own hurt that gives a measure of his power to heal. This and nothing else is the meaning of the Greek myth of the wounded physician. So interestingly, if you think about any field really, you think of the entrepreneur, they're solving their own problem of self of lack worth by trying to be, someone or something, and they just repeat on doing it. Think of Elon Musk, 6 or 7 divorces, multiple companies. There is a great funny thing in one conference, like a child asks, like, "Hey, how can I be like Elon Musk?" And Elon Musk answers, "You don't want to be like me." There's a lot of truth in it. Like he would talk about the fact that he works 80-hour weeks and there's no one to do his job. It's a bit of grandiosity, right? So he feels he's the only person in the world who can solve this. And I think that's very typical for entrepreneurs. They emotionally really deeply feel that I'm the only one who can do this. No one else is going to do it. I need to do it. So they have this drive. It's a very selected few bunch who are like ready to sacrifice themselves for their achievements, for their need to be their mask. They're so ready to sacrifice themselves that they're ready to die for the cause. And yeah, this until they wake up. Maybe they never wake up. So very, very interesting characters, I would say. Now, what I really like personally as a solution to these things is to see how you can evolve your characteristics. And I like Stoic philosophy, to develop different virtues in your life. Courage, humanity, justice, temperance, transcendence, wisdom and knowledge. Anything from honesty, perseverance, love and kindness, leadership, teamwork, ability to regulate yourself, forgiveness, humor and hope, not taking yourself too seriously, to transcend yourself, to be curious, not to judge, always love learning, always love evolving. Now, Stoic philosophy is, I think, more important than ever in the face of this world we live in. In Stoic philosophy, life is suffering. You have to know yourself, you have to know thyself, that you still have a choice, even if the world is going crazy and you're going crazy, you can still choose how you respond to situations. And that's where your virtues, your morals, your values come from. That's how you build character. Like, for example, if you never lie, if you decide that you're never going to lie, that's a moral virtue. And it doesn't mean you're going to lose, all the opportunities. Maybe you can turn that into a strength. So to me, like, there's a lot of solutions to these things. To be able to understand your emotions, your arousals, your like deepest aspects of yourself. Free will begins after the impulse. What is meditation all about is really, if you meditate, you are paying attention to what is happening, but you don't attach yourself to anything else, like anything specific, like you don't react. Like if a thought comes, you don't try to push the thought away, just recognize and let it fly away, morph into something else. So this act of like developing awareness, compassion towards yourself and others, and detachment to a certain sense, but the goal is not really detachment. The goal is not really to not take responsibility, not to get involved in anything because you will be attached. But the idea is to contribute with your fullest, like with all you have, like go all in. But if you lose it, don't be attached to it. So it's kind of like if you build a company, go ahead, build a company, don't be avoidant, do your best. But if it goes bankrupt, like don't kill yourself, don't take yourself too seriously. Even though it's part of you, it's part of your identity, it's not you. It's separate from you. So I think we need a new culture in terms of entrepreneurs as people who are into personal development, where we recognize weakness, not just mastery. There has been too much attention to mastery, too much attention to how to be the best, the biggest, the greatest. But that's a road to a narcissistic personality type. Our world leaders today are a reflection of the dark triad of personality types. If you think of any world leader, Putin or Biden or Trump or Xi, if you think about these guys, do they have the dark triad of behaviors, of narcissism, Machiavellism, maybe a little bit of psychopathy as well? Are they concerned about what other people think about them and then overreact to those situations with violence and greed and crushing everyone? Just to be like crushing everyone's building so that your will stand tallest? Like, I think that's it. And it's the same, behaviors that we see in CEOs, like statistically, CEOs, lawyers, doctors, border guards, like anyone who is in any kind of authority or power role easily starts to abuse that role as an extension of their own identity and self-worth. But if you understand that we are traumatized, for several generations of war and hunger and famine, and we carry these programs and codes in our genetics and epigenetics and behaviors and cultural genes, once you recognize them, you can change yourself. You can decide not to pass these codes forward. So Kevin writes here, Ramdas called it the mind net. We throw or are thrown everywhere we go. That's who we perceive ourselves to be, in a mirror of what others perceive us to be, like an infinite mirror game. Robert Anton Wilson described it as the reality tunnel. So we all have our own reality tunnel. So you can choose yours. It's up to you, like how you see that. And I think we take ourselves too seriously. That's why people jump from buildings, because they take their career, their identity, their mask too seriously. Think of Japanese salarymen in the last recession, where they just like jumped from buildings and killed themselves because they couldn't stand the fact that they're not able to stand up for their family or whatever identity they built. If you take yourself too seriously, of course, when you don't achieve the things that you expect from yourself, which is really an extension of what your parents or the society expected you to be, you just lose all meaning. So to make new meaning in this world, we need to recognize, also that, we're here to play. We don't need to take things too seriously. Like, man, yeah. Olena says, that is called social homogenization. Sue says, it has happened to me both in love and in professional relationship, and it was terrible to find the empty universe behind that mirror face. Exactly. What is, by the way, interesting is that people often, they recognize these things in others, and they like to talk about how narcissistic their former loved one or the former boss or everyone's former employer was a narcissist, of course. But like, do you see those aspects in you? Like, do you really see that when you're telling these stories, maybe you are the narcissist right there? Maybe you are the one who is like bypassing what happened. And one thing that I've seen in the entrepreneur community is the emergence of the conscious entrepreneur. Like that there's like this consciousness thing. And some of it is fueled by, psychedelics or cultural appropriation, or like some kind of like everyone is a brother or sister. And some of it is extremely fake. And actually sometimes the consciousness movement can turn against itself, that it becomes also a narcissistic extension of you, where you feel you're more conscious than others now, that because you realized all of these things, and you kind of push others down, at least in your mind, and think that those people are less developed. Now you are more consciously developed. And this happens a lot in spiritual communities, where spiritual community members and leaders who practice diligently meditation or read like ancient scriptures, and they start to believe that because they put all the work in, they are now more enlightened than others. And this spiritual grandiosity is a problem as well. I think Buddha said that the last trap that, God left for you is actually to start to believe that you're enlightened. And you have to let go of that idea that you somehow know better than others. To me, we all need to be more humble. Like, we need to exercise to be humble. And in the end, like, do you really value people who tell, yeah, I'm the greatest world's top, biohacker. I'm the father of biohacking. I'm not referring to anyone specifically. But do you really feel that they are truthful? Do you respect them? Or if they would say that I'm not always able to do what I'm set to do, I'm not always capable of, being the role model. If they're able to show weakness, would you trust them more? And in the end, like, if you genuinely feel that that person is like genuinely transparent and they show weakness, actually that can be seen as strength. I think like we all feel that way. Like, we want to see authentic, heart-centered people who are real, who don't fake things, and you can trust them, and they show up as they are. And in fact, if they show, their shadow and weakness to you, and they can talk about it and they can admit those aspects, maybe that makes them even more trustworthy. All right. As a biohacker, one thing that I really kind of came to understand through my work is that when I lost, connection to my body and was only in my mind, and everyone else was telling me how great I am, and the experience of really turning inwards, and which led to this Biohacker's Handbook, looking at how you can optimize your lifestyle and body and mind, like fixing your gut, fixing your nutrition, fixing your nutritional imbalances, doing enough exercise, doing enough different protocols for making sure that you recover fast and you optimize, recovery when you need it most, sleep and all that. It actually makes you more capable of not falling into your coping mechanisms. Because if you are relaxed, not stressed, and not like sympathetically activated and sleep deprived and brain fogged, it's more likely you're able to do the hard thing, which is to change your mind. And that's why we are kind of writing now the next book, The Resilient Being, which will come out for Christmas next year. If you like, our work, like order one of our books or pre-order this one. In this one, we go from the level of a single cell up to the whole organism. We start from, physical resilience, how to make you hard to kill. We look at the contextual and environmental resilience, but we also go into mental resilience. I think we spoke a little bit about it here. But what I really spoke about is the social and spiritual resilience. Like, how do you really, show up every day, and why? And what are your, ego and shadow and your traumas and emotions? So if you like what I'd shared today, like, pre-order this book. You can actually pre-order it now at minus 20%. Here comes the plug, by the way. So you better give me some narcissistic supply here by going to biohackercenter.com because we have Cyber Monday, the courses, the video recordings of our events, the books, the online courses, they're all even at 70% discount. There is, for example, the Biohacker Summit recording of the last Biohacker Summit, where I spoke about the dark side of personal development and also the how to become a conscious, resilient being. So there's some talks there, but there's great talks in this whole recording package. 110 hours of material, and you can get it from biohackersummit.com. And in terms of the different online courses, we have Fix Your Gut, minus 70%, to optimize your lab work, also minus 70%. Biohacking for Women is also at discount. Biohacking Love and Relationships from Anna Lindfors, that's also at discount. Optimizing your work environment and work-life balance. Yeah, there is a bunch of other things there as well. Also, the next conference we have 14 and 15 of October in Amsterdam is about expanding consciousness. And you can get 2 tickets for the price of 1 still this week. So jump to the opportunity. Feed my narcissistic supply by showing me big numbers from this webinar. Oh my God. We all do it, don't we? So, and if you want to get these kind of cool glasses that filter blue light, you can also get it from our store, as well as red light therapy devices. But I'm happy to answer some questions and comment still a few things. Aike Festini says, this all sounded more like soul hacking to me. Appreciate your time, and this presentation offered a lot of food for thought. Thank you, Aike. Yeah, I think we really need to investigate why we are doing what we do. Like, we need to really think, why do we wake up in the morning and do whatever we do? It's so important, isn't it? And yeah, Anaela is saying, I can see all my shadow narcissistic parts now. Even if I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm in a launching process, and it makes me think about my posture, intention, and who I truly am. Yeah, exactly. Like, when you go to, those events, like, maybe you can help the other people also to recognize that, hey, let's be a little bit more heart-centered. And here's a little hack that I used in Slush conference before the pandemic. I went to meetings with investors, 50 meetings in the course of 2 days. And what I did, when I opened up the meeting and I put the laptop on the table with my presentation, my pitch deck, I put a timer on the table and I said, let's close eyes, just for 1 minute and take some deep breaths. And just extend your out breath as you do it. So basically, 1 second in, 2 seconds out. And then 2 seconds in. And then 4 seconds out. 1 minute. And of course, this activates the parasympathetic nervous system. You become less fearful, less operating from your automatic subconscious learned patterns. You become more relaxed, more creative. You start to listen more. And what happened in those meetings, like the overstimulation, whatever they had from coffee, or like self-centeredness, just disappeared in 1 minute. And you could have a real conversation, and you can truthfully then tell what's going on. And interestingly enough, when I did that, they would listen what I say, and there would be follow-ups. They would email me back. So maybe it's just, our nervous system that is in this kind of fight or flight, survival mode all the time because of social media, social technologies, notifications, all of that. And this kind of high energy environments, maybe it is that makes us, more fearful and avoidant, and actually self-centered and more in a survival mode of thinking, what's in it for me all the time. But if you make people relax, help their nervous systems relax, give them a hug, be a bit more heart-centered, maybe that's the way to hack, not just yourself, but your relationships and the others, as you interact with them, that they actually listen to what you have to say and you listen what they have to say. It was beautiful. Like meetings could be just like 10 minutes, but in the end, like these people would be more present. And in the end, I slept better. Like my nervous system was more calm when I went to sleep in the evening. So try that. I do it often when I go to meetings or board meetings. I try to close my eyes and just take deep breaths, but try to do that with people before you start a meeting. And maybe as you synchronize your breathing, you start to, resonate more. It's such a simple hack. You have conscious agency over your nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, through your breathing. And in that way, as you synchronize together, that might help. And this is, what tribes did. They would sing or dance or breathe together or whatever. And as they synchronized, they were able to, become one. They could see that they're not separate from others, but they are all in this together. And maybe that's the experience that we are lacking in today's society, that we feel we are separate from others. And if we just breathe together, maybe that is the way that brings us back, to the mother's womb, or back to, hugging your caretaker, and then you can trust more. It's such a simple thing, but this is probably what we need to do in today's high-octane environments. But indeed, I thank you all. I hope you got something out of this. To evolve and recognize aspects of yourself. And go to biohackercenter.com. We ship internationally. You can get some of our work there at a discount that is more discounts than, you won't be getting this discount again, at least this year, maybe next year. But thank you everyone for joining. Thank you for the love and the narcissistic supply. Maybe see you somewhere, maybe at Biohacker Summit next year. You can still get your ticket to join Expanding Consciousness, because that's really what's needed right now, is to expand consciousness, not just in terms of drugs, but also in terms of awareness and understanding why we are here and why we do what we do. All right. Cheers. And if you like this, please share and subscribe to our channel and all that narcissistic supply bullshit that every influencer is doing. Thank you. Namaste. Bye-bye. Be well.